Thanks everyone for joining another in the Panalyt series of webinars on people analytics. This is a joint presentation with ourselves and our esteemed partners in Latin America, PeopleOPTI, talking about how to build a strategic people analytics function. We're going to talk a bit about the strategy and practical aspects of running a PA function in the modern period. I will do a couple of introductions here. So for myself, my name's Daniel West. I'm the founder and CEO of Panalyt. I've spent over 20 years in in-house HR, running teams at places like Apple, Morgan Stanley, and Uber. I've worked in both strategic HR roles and HR technology roles, and a lot of what Panalyt is comes from my background in spending far too many hours in late nights pulling together data sets and putting them into Excel and merging them into useful and interesting presentations for senior management in PowerPoint, etc. And then having to do it all over again the next week and the next week, and not having an easy tool that would pull data together, and not being able to find a tool on the market that would allow us to pull data from any system easily and put it into useful visuals for managers. And that's really why we started Panalyt about 3.5 years ago now. Yeah, that's me. And I'm joined by a great colleague of ours who runs a great business and is really a great thought leader in the people analytics space in Latin America. And I'm very pleased to introduce my good friend Fede.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Daniel, for the invitation. And for me, it's a pleasure to be with you in this joint webinar talking about people analytics, which is like a passion that we share. And just as a brief presentation of myself, I have over 15 years as a consultant in HR and more than 7 years in the people analytics space, executing projects for clients, trying to solve business problems like attrition, absenteeism, sales, performance. And also, I am the academic director of the People Analytics Executive Program at the Tecnológico of Monterrey, which is a university here in Mexico. And I think what we have been talking about, Daniel, in the last, few months is how HR department and specifically people analytics teams are building the different capabilities to deliver more value to the companies. And I think it's a great excuse to share with everybody here at the webinar all of our experience and our vision of the future of the area.
Absolutely. Yeah, thanks very much for joining us, Fede. I will take a moment to ask if you have questions along the way. Please do use the Q&A function that's built into Zoom. You'll see a little button that says Q&A. Do hit that and put your questions in there. We can see them as we're going along. We are going to hold 10 to 15 minutes at the end for answering all of the questions. But if myself or my colleague Yusuf that's online, if we can answer them kind of along the way in the chat, we will. But please do use that Q&A function to flag any questions that you have as we go along. Yeah, and we're gonna spend about half our time looking at sort of overall people analytics strategy, and then we're going to dig a little bit into some of the aspects of the Panalyt tool that support that strategy, and then we'll get into Q&A. Okay. So on with the presentation. I think over to you, Fede, if you want to kick us off.
So we are living a transformational time, and historically we have thought about an organization as a group of people brought together to achieve a common goal. And probably what we have in mind in terms of what is that goal is not necessarily what the vast amount of people in the conversation is related with. Not a lot of people is directly interacting with that word of what is a goal. So therefore, we have like potential risk of alienating people if we are not setting or aligning all the organization between the behaviors and the strategic goals of an organization. Therefore, I think that in order to better understand the motivations and the reason to align all the different systems or the incentives is to create or to consistently align behaviors with goals. And therefore, we have data in the middle of that sentence that we can use to align behaviors with goals. Everybody in the organization have very specific goals. So therefore, if we want to have an alternative definition to what is an organization, we can think about how we can make more relevant everyone within an organization, how we can give empowerment to people to interact with more information in a company, and how we can enable leaders to be architects of organizational design. So for me, at least, an organization is a system for moving information from place to place. And that's where people analytics comes into place. If we think about people as the most strategic capital that a company can have. But if we go to the next slide, Daniel, I don't know if you wanted to comment something on that, Dan.
No,
I'm
I
sorry.
no, at all. I totally agree. It's such an interesting perspective because I think about all the kind of logistics focused organizations I've worked for in the past and finance focused organizations. Then people instantly realize that data is the key attribute that you've got. If you don't know where your product is in the supply chain, you don't have a business. If you don't know how much you're selling product for, you don't have a business. And yet, I think it's taken an awfully long time for us to understand that the nature of people and the people working for the organization, that the data is just as important as the data about where your product is. But I think that realization has really come of age now, and I think this past year of during COVID and the working from home explosion has really focused people's attention on understanding where their people are and getting their hands around the data on people. So totally agree.
Yeah. So if we think about HR, on average, we have 10 to 12 technologies ranging from the typical HRIS to pulse surveys or any other technology that we may have in the area. But the problem is that the more classical or traditional kind of companies, we are still seeing that data is distributed in silos where we are analyzing data out of one technology at a time. And this is not giving us the lever to have a more impactful people system. And the thing is that the more digital companies who are creating the most critical competitive advantages are having a different mindset or a culture regarding data, or how at least they are consolidating and exploiting the data. Where what leaders are saying about the data is that the data is owned by the company, and where you have the more traditional type of culture where leaders are saying data is from my own area, data belongs to my area, and there you have silos that are not enabling leaders to be more empowered to make better decisions about what is going on in the business related to people. And this is something that we are seeing, and obviously new technologies like Panalyt are trying to bridge that gap, where the data is not a problem in terms of how you locate the data and how you store it, and obviously how you exploit the data. And I don't know, Dan, if you have seen this problem in your previous experiences.
Yeah, absolutely. If you look at any large organization, historically, there's always been that tension about who owns which piece of data, and the problems of HR walking into a meeting with senior leadership and people want to understand how productive employees are, but if HR never has access to finance data on revenues or total company costs, or doesn't have any access to data from the business, it's very difficult to talk about productivity. And I think that's always driven a great dissatisfaction from leadership on the incompleteness of the data they're getting. And I think in some ways, I think if I look back from where we are now to let's say 5 years ago, I think it's actually not just a silo culture. I think were some real concerns around data confidentiality, how secure data is, how granularly you could control data once it's released from your own team systems. Is it going to be kept securely in other teams? And I think that was a valid concern in some cases, although I don't think people made enough effort to solve that. I think politics often got in the way. But now, very clearly, we've got tools that can where you have more granular control over the release of data. And again, the cloud-based tools and tools like Panalyt, where you have that control and restriction on people being able to see the top line of numbers, but not being able to see the granularity, for example. Those kind of tools weren't really available to dig into data from different silos. So I think part of it is cultural change, the change we're seeing now, but part of it is enabled by the technology change. But yeah, I definitely am seeing a massive change in the clients I talk to day to day now, who are really focused on building a common data warehouse, building a common data lake, and being able to access all the company data to gain insights versus even just a few years ago.
And it's amazing to see how you store and keep the data has like a direct impact on the level of adoption and scalability of people analytics, which brings to the next slide the whole issue. And it's a rhetorical question. We have been discussing this with Daniel. It's if a company can be data driven if HR is not data driven. And it's a very interesting discussion is if we can build a culture of being data driven without HR being it. So we are seeing like a relationship between your technology stack in terms of how you use technology has a direct impact on the speed of adoption and scalability of people analytics. So you're going to be impacting your technology structure is going to have a direct impact on the number of use cases that you can produce from people analytics team, the kind of business impact, and also in terms of the scalability, the frequency that your organization or business leaders are making decisions based on data, and of course the number of users that you have in your company using data to make better informed decisions about how you manage people within your organization.
Yeah.
And
I do think
so,
there's definitely a direct relationship between the two, because you're talking to a lot of companies who don't believe that their managers are going to embrace the data that they're putting out there, and they're struggling to get managers to actually look at the people data and take it seriously in their day-to-day decisions. But I think that's directly linked to being able to articulate the use case. If you're not able to articulate, this is how you use the data to solve this problem, or this is what's going to be the business impact of looking at this particular data set or using this data tool. If you can't, I think HR sometimes struggles to articulate that business impact to managers.
and I think related to that, I think that one of the cultural aspect that we need to transform in HR is that we need to give the means to business leaders to make better informed decisions about people. And that's very strategic about something very strategic about the people analytics function, what kind of information we are going to provide to the rest of the company to make better decisions. And that's I think it's an open door to a data driven in HR. It's not just HR, it's the whole company because we are managing people.
Yeah. Okay.
So this is a concept that we would like to open to all of you. A concept that we think we are going to be seeing in the people analytics team in the near future, which is we have two type of approaches to people analytics. The push approach, where the people analytics team proactively delivers insight to the rest of the company, and the pull strategy, which is a more technological approach, where the company consumes in a more self-service manner all the insights and data that the people analytics is producing automatically. So what we are thinking about, or what we are seeing about the future of the people analytics team, is a fusion between these two approaches, where the people analytics is going to focus in a more consulting kind of approach, providing very specific recommendation to business problems, and also providing to the rest of the company the means to make better informed decisions about how to manage people in real time in a very self-service manner through different technologies, like obviously like Panalyt or any other technology. But the interesting thing is that the risk from the push strategy is that the rest of the company perceives the people analytics team as a project-based team, which is a risk because we are not going to produce a transformation, or at least a transformation from a culture perspective, from a data-driven perspective. And also, if we have a standalone approach from a pool strategy, we are not going to have also a transformation from a data-driven perspective. So the real question here is, how do we complement these two approaches? How do we structure a team in a way that we can provide these two types of solution, so that not only HR but also business leaders can improve the way that we manage, we make more effective the management system about people.
Yeah, absolutely. Just a reminder to everyone that that Q&A button there on your controls for Zoom. You see that Q&A button. Please do use that to register questions. I see some questions coming in that are looking pretty good that we will definitely get to answering at the end of the whole session. So please do use that Q&A to register your questions there. Yeah, absolutely, Fede. I think this has been a real revelation to me, sort of talking through this whole presentation with you the last few weeks, and it's really brought me to realize that without exception, all the organizations I worked with before starting Panalyt were very much fixed on a push strategy, and it was never articulated in that way. But that idea of some centralized team creating content and pushing it out to managers was the only mode that the HR team or the people analytics team was in. And in founding Panalyt, we were pardon me, we were very much focused on creating that pull strategy. And creating a tool that would enable that, but not articulating that actually really what's necessary is a combination.
Yeah, and you have one latent risk if you don't apply like a pull strategy, which is that you're going to have like a push strategy that is going to be creating value to the company, but on the other hand, you're going to have the rest of the company making decisions on the traditional way and destroying the value that you create from another side of the company. And that's a risk that you have if you don't apply both strategies at the same time. So going to the next slide, people analytics team need to focus on what is the type of value or problem that you want to solve. So pretty much there you're going to have business partners listening to business leaders, trying to understand what kind of challenges are aligned to the business strategy that can be solved from an analytics perspective. You are going to operationalize the solution to that challenge, and then you're going to have, or you could apply these two types of strategies, the push and the pull. Eventually, every single push strategy can be converted or transformed to a pull strategy, which is should be in the pipeline of production on how you create a product out of a push strategy. But either of the two should be transformed into a change management strategy, which should impact in a very specific result or business result of the company. So there is how you can construct like a more strategic people analytics function, considering these two strategies. You were going to say something then.
Yeah, no, this is exactly how I think our how we think about Panalyt and how we talk about Panalyt with especially our larger clients or more sophisticated clients. This is how we talk about it as this adoption journey where they have already identified their priorities and their challenges around people, the priorities for their people analytics work, and they've been working on things like Tableau or Power BI to try to address those, and they've almost all gotten mired in the mud of constantly having to rerun and recreate pieces of analysis that they've now done 100 times. They've set themselves up with a stack of reports to run to address particular challenges, but they're not automatable. They're not scalable, and it means that a highly effective team at the beginning of their process, and as they start pulling their data together, start addressing a couple of challenges, they get things done early on. But then they get stuck because they have to keep on repeating that same analysis again and again, and they can't move on to, or either they can't move on to new things, or the stuff that they had worked out kind of just falls away and gets neglected, doesn't get repeated. People don't have access to fresh data of the previous analysis, and that was very much the case at Uber, where I think the data science team helped us there to do a couple of really interesting and innovative pieces of work that I've spoken about on other webinars. But then the output from that work wasn't scalable. We could never repeat it again to actually test if any of our interventions were doing any good. We could understand how the dimensions of a challenge at one point in time, but it wasn't scalable. And so the conversation with Panalyt, or with those clients about Panalyt, has been very much how can we productize through our engine your insights so that you go out there and identify a challenge and an insight and a solution, and then get it into Panalyt as a scalable, repeatable, self-service piece of analysis, so that then that analytics team can then move on to their next challenge and their next product. And I think this is exactly this as you term it, the adoption journey. I think it's absolutely critical, because I think fundamentally the push strategy fundamentally doesn't work unless you're going to keep on adding more and more and more resources to keep up with all of the product you're creating, and if you can't make it scalable with a pull tool. So yeah, I think this is I think you really hit on something there.
Yeah, which is really critical to if you're going to manage like a scarce resource as a people analytics team. you need to focus on what is really, really important to solve from a push strategy. And that's critical. And sometimes companies doesn't know what are the business challenges from where they can add value from this methodology. And if we move to the next slide,
Oop.
this is like very high level explanation of how you can structure like a push methodology, where you can start with a business question, then you're going to test the hypothesis related to that business question. Then you're going to build a storytelling based on those critical uh, hypotheses that has the strongest relationship to the business question. And then you're going to create or transform your processes or products or services that you're providing within your company. And reinforcing what you were saying is critical, that the people analytics team that is going to be executing a push strategy can really understand what is the strategy of the company, because those are going to be the big questions that you want to solve from this perspective. And in the long run, you are going to try to automate the kind of insight that you can produce. And if we go to the next slide, we want to share with you an example of what is an insight. And this is an insight based or created based on a hypothesis. The hypothesis is this is a cultural belief of one of my clients. People that work a lot of extra hours have the highest attrition risk in the company. So one of the very interesting things that we did was to measure and segment the population of the company based on the amount of hours that the people work in a month. And what it was very interesting is that the patterns that we created were very different among the different amount of hours that the people work. So there you can see the different behaviors of related with the attrition risk of people. And this is very difficult to scale over time with the technology, because you are attacking a cultural belief, you are attacking what people is believing that is happening in a company. But nobody, up until the time you do this kind of analysis, nobody has empirically validated if it is true or not this kind of hypothesis, which is you can deliver a huge amount of value trying to understand what is going on with your people, but you have this kind of restraints in terms of how you produce this into a technology, or how you automate these kind of insights into something that is consumable by everybody in the company.
No, it's a perfect example. It's a perfect example of something that a data science team can do at a high level, that can present to a C-suite and say, "Look at this impact. Look at how we can directly from clean, accurate data, how we can understand and predict a direct impact on the business." And it's a perfect example of how you can add value as a data science team, as a people analytics team, but then how do you then actionalize it, right? You've provided the value, that you've raised this insight, you've created awareness with the C-suite, but then you hit that so what moment. Like, okay, well, now I understand this, but so what? Because I can't do anything with this information if I can't get it to the managers on the ground in a scalable way. And I mean scalable both in the sense of getting it out to a large number of managers who can actually make day-to-day decisions about how their people are working to improve the attrition outcome, but not just scalable in terms of number of people, but scalable over time, that the data's going to be constantly updated and constantly be correct without a huge amount of effort every time. To do this kind of analysis as a one-off piece is it requires a huge amount of back-end work to create and clean the data set and make it into an understandable piece of data. Doing that repeatedly in a non-scalable way, it just is madness. And again, this is what I think sucks up the time of good people analytics teams, who then can't progress. Yeah, unless you can get this kind of data to HR business partners and line managers so that they can understand how this applies to their population and their team, and then they can start to make interventions and then see how this data changes, then there was kind of no point in doing it in the first place. If you can't actionalize it, what was the point in doing it? If it was just to raise awareness, you definitely hit a so what really quickly.
Which brings like a very important thing is that um, the business question that is going to guide this kind of projects needs to be so strategic that even though like some priorities may change in your company, this kind of project is still relevant even though you have COVID or any other challenge in the business, because you need to keep in mind that these kind of projects are going to be delivered in cycles of time. You're going to be delivering this in 3-4 month cycles, which the risk is that you may deliver this too late for the business to make a decision.
Absolutely.
So that's critical to separate what you're going to be doing in a push strategy and what you're going to be doing in a pull strategy. So you need to identify what kind of information the business is going to be consuming on real time. So that's critical for the analysis to define a strategy on how you're going to separate a push and a pull strategy.
Yeah, totally agree. I think that's absolutely it. It's and I'm seeing some of the questions coming up through the Q&A tool, and yeah, please do put your questions into the Q&A tool. But I'm seeing several of the same question, which is how do I move from a push strategy to a pull strategy? How do I get into a pull strategy rather than a push strategy? And I think and this is really, again, come clear to me through this whole discussion with Fede is understanding that this is a continuous process, that it's not either or. You have to have both. You have to have this push strategy, which is creating and leveraging the company people data, actually to get the people data actually into a usable pipeline and format, and to support critical business decisions in a timely way, something that's unique to your business, and the data team should be able to jump on that and provide insights very quickly and support the business challenges in the immediate term. But then to use to move on to then a pull strategy with that piece of content, with that insight, and automate it, democratize it, empower managers by promoting trust. You're trusting them with the data. So data transparency breeds trust, which breeds ownership. And you're also freeing up the people analytics team to focus on the next challenge rather than having to keep repeating the same piece of analysis. And that allows you to ongoing build your capabilities. If the people analytics team is always able to, once they've identified an insight, once they've identified a useful piece of information, they can move it into a repeatable tool or strategy, then they can improve their own capabilities to respond quickly to the business. And the pull capabilities continue to grow and advance. And we absolutely see this in Panalyt. The Panalyt tool improves every month with new releases, and a lot of those releases are driven by feedback from the clients about how clients are actually using the tool or what they want the tool to be able to do. The tool gets more sophisticated, grows in complexity, grows in its ability to support the business. And so your pull tools will grow in capability, driven by the efforts of that push strategy. So in balance with what Fede was saying about the push strategy, the process of that, you have the process of the pull strategy, democratizing your data, making your data visible and available to line managers and business partners, empowering them, actively coaching them to use those tools, how to translate an insight about their people into an action with their people, and that leads you to that positive change feedback loop where there is some prompt, whether that prompt is you have a sense of lowering that the performance is getting lower, you have some sense that there is a gender imbalance in the organization, you have a sense that attrition is increasing. There is some prompt to start thinking and start looking at the data, and then you drive managers using that prompt, using that use case to look at the data, gain insights. That drives action. And when you've taken action, you want to see results. So you go back to the data to see results. And now you're in a positive feedback loop because now you have managers actively using the tools that you've put in front of them. Because you've articulated one or two key use cases, there is a positive reinforcement where they get more comfortable with the data, they get more comfortable with the tools, and they will start to find their own insights. And I think we worry too much about sort of getting managers to support this strategy, to start understanding the data and taking it seriously. I think some people have had some bad experiences with just trying to introduce one-off piece of analysis and try to get managers to take it seriously. But we're talking about a long change game here. We're talking about changing managers' mindsets, that people data isn't a report that they're waiting for every month, or that people management isn't just a matter of gut instinct about how I know how to manage people based on my gut feeling. It's about changing all of those attitudes that to the point where people data is instantly available, and they should believe that it's going to be always instantly available, and that it's better to manage people informed by data rather than just your gut. And it's a change process. And just if you have some early disappointments in a change process, doesn't mean you give up on it. But I would say, sorry, go on. Yeah, Fanny.
No, I was going to say that with the pool strategy, it's going to change the purpose of the people analytics team. We usually think about the people analytics team as a team that is going to be delivering insights, and that's it. That's the end of the work that the people analytics do. And with the pool strategy, the focus is not only structuring the data and making a technological solution that is going to democratize the data, but also helping business leaders make better decisions, to educate the leaders to try to understand how to make better decisions around people, which is a different kind of role, because I've never seen a book saying about that, which is we are so focused on data science that's like the big world of people analytics. And I think the big challenge for the future of the discipline is how we teach a company to make better decisions. And that's a critical point. That's the game changer.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right, and you're really articulating. I think I say repeatedly about Panalyt and my own background is I'm just focused on practical people analytics. I'm not a data scientist. I'm not. I'm an HR business partner really, and I'm focused on the practical application of people analytics, not the data science. And I think you're absolutely right that data scientists and data specialists and project managers and business partners who are all working in the people analytics field, they need to, as you say, I agree with you, redefine what the purpose of their team is not just to do the analytics and produce the insight. It's to change that culture around how to use data inside the company. I think you're absolutely right. And my final point on this slide is scalability, again, it being a critical factor. We know that the people team only has a certain amount of time and resources. If you look at your year, you know X% of your year is going to be taken up with your evaluation cycle and your recruitment processes and your comp cycle. There is a huge amount of time taken up with the repeatable HR calendar. You only have a very short amount of time in a year to drive things like new people analytics implementations and take up. And so you only have that short amount of time and resources. And I strongly believe you need to make sure that every moment of that is focused on creating that data-driven people management culture and helping managers to improve decisions, it shouldn't be based on building tools. And I know I have this huge bias because I'm selling a tool, but when I was in-house, I strongly believe this, that you shouldn't be doing in-house development of tools. No one thinks you should be building an in-house version of Tableau or Power BI. That's crazy. You buy them off the shelf, implement it, and you get on with doing the analysis, not building the tools. And exactly the same for tools like Panalyt and all of our competitors. You shouldn't be trying to recreate those tools in-house, because that is just a waste of time for an in-house team to be trying to build your own analytics tools. You need to take the tools off the shelf and spend your time on implementing and using them. Because we see way too many companies that are building big people analytics teams, and the first thing they want to do is build a tool. And I know they're going to be spending the next year building that tool, not spending the next year actually helping the business.
So the last slide that we have in terms of the theory of what we think companies can do to build a strategic function is that people analytics is going to change the purpose of HRBPs. We think that the future of business, the business partners' role are going to be more focused on being an agent of change and not a supportive area as it is today for most companies. These are very cool statistics from BCR, where we have 21% acknowledging that they have like a very strong culture of change management, and only 1/3 of the companies are developing the skills necessary for business partners to be agents of change. So the real challenge for our future in HR is how do we transform this critical role for the people analytics role into agent of change, where data is like the main fuel to produce all the changes that we want to see in any organization.
Absolutely. Grant, I'm looking at the time and also a lot of questions, so we want to leave at least 10 minutes at the end for questions. So I'm just going to spend 5 minutes on this next part of the presentation. So we wanted to show some of the tools within Panalyt that we think really speak to this idea of the push strategy moving into that pull strategy. Pardon me. And so how do you empower managers to make better data-informed decisions? I'm going to very, very briefly show you some screenshots from our attrition engagement risk product and how I believe managers can use that tool. In terms of working from home, we've got a real focus on productivity and team engagement, how to understand that and measure that, and a practical tool for managers. And in a similar way, understanding the how relationships get built with remote onboarding. And if I think we have time, we'll get onto sales effectiveness. And if we don't have time, you can we'll be sharing this deck at the end anyway. And there are other webinars where I've talked about some of these tools we can point you to. So talking about attrition risk, this is a tool that we use where a tool that we've developed where we use machine learning to analyze our clients' historical data on a dozen different data points that are very common within most HR data sets: age, gender, tenure, who your manager is, compensation, and looking at those attributes, we're able to understand and predict risk of attrition over time. So here you can see we have an overall view, a sort of a high level view per organization, per location, the key demographics of the level of the percentage of headcount that is at different risk levels in the organization. So what we want to be able to do is allow a manager or a business partner to, at a glance, see where their risk hotspots are so that they can start to drill into the individual view. And then this individual view allows them to see per employee. It doesn't have to be per employee. Some clients want to just stop at a sort of sub-team level or minimum cohorts of 3 or 5, which is also totally doable and understandable. But if you look at it at that more granular level, you can see what the key drivers are that's driving that high attrition risk score, whether they haven't had a salary increase, whether their compensation is below the internal average, whether their manager has a high attrition rate as a manager. And then you're able to develop individual strategies to address each of those drivers for those individuals or teams. And so this is a tool where the HR business partner and a line manager can collaborate to turn that high level data into immediate actionable interventions. And it's that movement from what was a push tool of that high level risk analysis that we've essentially productized and made into a repeatable, scalable interface and dashboard for line managers and business partners to use. But of course, it isn't only a attrition risk. There are many companies and many areas of the world where low engagement doesn't actually lead to attrition for one reason or another, whether it's cultural or economic or whatever. Not in every culture, disengaged people actually leave. So rather than exclusively think of this as an attrition risk prediction, thinking of it as a loss of engagement risk prediction. Why are people becoming less engaged? It's going to be some very, very, very similar drivers to why in other cultures they would just be leaving the organization. And a key one that we've identified is a real key driver in those markets where we see less attrition, particularly organizations in Japan, organizations in Latin America, where we're seeing very low engagement, even though there's low attrition, is that there's very little movement within those populations rather. So movement between teams, movement between locations, where we see populations that have moved, that have changed, that have advanced their career by changing their role and getting new experiences, you have much higher levels of engagement and much lower levels of that predicted risk. And so these tools where you can visualize that movement, and also here where you can visualize people's movement through their career, you can start to identify strategies where you can increase that engagement by targeting the teams or the individuals that have had very low mobility within the organization and give them new challenges, and that will increase your engagement and lower that risk. Very quickly, looking at the working from home data that we've been able to make actionable for clients. We've looked at productivity in terms of the number of hours people spend on email, on chat. So we pull data from tools like Microsoft 365 and G Suite and Slack. We pull the metadata, so we don't look at content. We don't do sentiment analysis. We just look at who from, who to, and timestamps. But you can generate an enormous amount of information about how much time people are spending on email, or how much time they're spending on chat, how much time they're spending in meetings, the nature of those meetings. Is it productive time or not? And you can really start to see are people becoming overloaded, or is actually their productivity decreasing? So definitely what clients were looking for, especially in the early days of the working from home, is those collaboration hours massively decreasing. So if you see this over time chart at the bottom, it shows you per month the number of hours people are spending on collaboration tools in their regular work hours and outside their regular work hours. And what the data showed, it was a rapid decrease in the regular work hours collaboration collaboration hours, and it meant that people were spending less time during their regular work hours available on Slack, available in email, and managers were noticing this, and managers, and particularly senior leaders, were feeling that their productivity of their organization was dipping dramatically. Whereas what the data showed was that in the non-work hours, their employees were compensating. So really this was people time shifting, not doing so much of their work during regular work hours because of dependence, etc. They were doing more work outside of regular work hours. And the immediate intervention, the immediate strategy that the business partners could use to support the business was to really shift when managers were expecting work to be done, how they set deadlines, and when they set their one-on-one meeting times, when they set their catch-up meetings with their teams. They started to adjust all of those to take into account that people were logging in at different hours and were spending more of their time in different work hours, and it made managers more responsive to their teams, and it meant that team cohesiveness was really preserved in a lot of these organizations. So again, a very practical outcome of what seems like a high-level analysis, the kind of analysis you would do during a push exercise, a one-off exercise, but we've been able to productize it and make it repeatable and scalable.
Dan,
Sorry, yeah, Fede.
do you think that we can go to the Q&A? Because
Yeah.
we have
I'll
9 minutes.
Absolutely. I'll just zoom through these slides so people can see what's available. So there's some slides here that talk about how you can understand employees, new hire employees, and their engagement with their teams. And there's a number of slides here about sales effectiveness, how you can use this relationship data to understand the relationship between your clients and your salespeople over time through this electronic data, and particularly how you can understand how individuals on your client side are connecting with individuals on your internal teams. But yeah, super fascinating stuff, and yeah, highly recommend have a look at this and drop me a line if you'd like to talk about it further. But yeah, onto the questions in terms of. I was just looking at were there any of the questions you wanted to jump on, Fede? I saw a couple that were really interesting, but yeah, go ahead.
There is one about the aha moment, helping to connect data with business success. I think it's very important to start with a very, very important business question that is going to mobilize the whole company. At the beginning, I started with attrition. Attrition was, we were working with retail companies with attrition that was very like a common pattern in the whole industry. And connected with another question, we didn't do like the Wikipedia strategy, which is grabbing all the data and trying to see what the data is telling us. We did the opposite. What we did was we started with business question and the hypothesis or the cultural beliefs of the company, where we're structuring the kind of data that we needed to answer what was important for the client. Because if the client is not able to express the cultural belief, it's because it's not relevant for the company. Then you can do like a double click in the data, align with the hypothesis that you want to test with the data. So I don't recommend to do the Wikipedia approach, which is grabbing the data and see what the data is telling us. I recommend to do the opposite. Start with what is relevant for the organization. Start generating a library of hypotheses that are relevant to different stakeholders around the company and start answering that. That's my recommendation to those two questions.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. So yeah, there's a related question, which is HR is renowned for collecting data, but not necessarily using it to bring commercial success or communicate to the business effectively. I think that's absolutely right. I think we have an explosion in the number of SaaS tools that we use in HR. There's an enormous amount of data that we own, and we're just not leveraging it, partly because we struggle to get it all in one place and make sense of it, and then we struggle to communicate it and make it relevant to the business. We talk to clients very often that are trying to solve 20, 30 different use cases, and they want to solve everything with a tool tomorrow. And I try to counsel people to focus on one or two really concrete use cases that you can action and make repeatable and find really prove the value to the business through those much more limited use cases. It's better to do a smaller number of interventions and get it right than try to do 20 different things and fail on all of them. But so I would definitely, as Fede says, I think focusing on attrition is always a winner. If you can lower attrition, if you can prevent the loss of good people, obviously that's a huge win. But I think it's also important in how you phrase it. It's not just holding on to people. It's about showing people, as we were saying about the attrition risk, it's about understanding why they are becoming demotivated and trying to solve for that. So that's where really I've been interested in this idea of internal mobility, career growth is so strongly aligned with retention and engagement, and I think that was a real aha moment for me seeing that, and I think it's a great example of how you can make the data and analytics really relevant to the business.
And also from the projects that we did from a push perspective, we were able to calculate how much money they were losing or not selling because of attrition.
Yeah.
And that's the aha moment for the client. When the client understands the indirect cost of attrition, it's amazing. You see the eyes of the client very wide open, and that's the aha moment when you can relate how not only the direct cost of replacing people, but you can see how you can impact sales. That's incredible.
Yeah. I see a question here about how we balanced quality data gathering without violating data privacy. I think obviously that's an important question, and it's important both technically, legally in many markets, and just in general. It's a morally and ethically correct question to take. Like we strongly believe that in transparency, so employees should absolutely know every data that's being collected and held about them, and we strongly believe that they have that right to ask to see their data at any time. And we're actively working within Panalyt to have an interface where any employee can see the data that we've generated about them for their own personal growth and understanding. I think transparency is the absolute key to all of this. I think particularly about communication data, there's a sensitivity around communication data. It's one of the reasons why we very deliberately made the decision to only look at metadata, not look at content. I believe most employees can understand the value of just that network behavior, whereas I think most people are really concerned about people or even a system actually analyzing what they write and how they write it and making judgments about them based on their use of language. I think that's a really problematic area for emotionally and morally for most people. So I think transparency is key. I think having robust processes around how you protect the data and how you manage it. And I think thinking carefully about, is it a legitimate use of the data? Are you using the data to help the employee, not harm the employee? And I think as long as you've got those controls and processes in place and you're explaining it to your team, I think it's you can get past that concern. The other one I wanted to look at, someone was asking, what's the relationship score in this network data that's on the screen behind me, and how's it different from an engagement score? It is actually very similar to an engagement score, and there are many of the factors that we use to calculate the relationship score are definitely very, very good proxies of engagement. So our relationship score between two individuals is built on the volume of communication between them over a certain time period, and how equal communication is, how quickly they reply to each other. And then an overall organization's relationship score is obviously the mean average of all of the individuals within it. So if a team's relationship score is dipping, it would mean that the bulk or the majority of individuals in the team are having weaker relationships overall, whether that's just inside the team or whether that's relationships with anyone in the organization. And we can see both dimensions of that. So relationship score, it can be a very good proxy for engagement, but it's not the only reason. So not the only reason for a loss of relationship would be a loss of engagement. That might be true, but it might also be overwork and stress. When people are overworked, they tend to communicate less with their colleagues. And so that's why it's important to be able to look at that other data I showed, where you can see the collaboration hours and how much time they're spending actually on work activities. So where you see that rapidly climbing and relationship scores really declining, then you are facing burnout and overwork. But where the activities are staying relatively constant and relationship scores are dipping, that is most likely a loss of engagement. So you can see a combination of data sets that are easily available in the tool. You can start to understand those the nuances. Any other question you wanted to jump onto, Fede? Last question.
I think we cover, most of them,
Yeah.
and we are on
We're
time.
just on time. You want to stay on time? Yeah, it's very good of you. Being very, very considerate of our audience. Well, thanks so much, Fede, for joining. I really appreciate it. This has
It's
been
a
a
pleasure.
really, really
And
fun
thank you for
session.
the invitation.
No, not at all. And thanks everyone for joining. Thanks for your great questions. We are going to be sharing the deck afterwards. There'll be a video available of the session. And I know that Yusuf's going to share some of the other webinars and videos that we've done previously on some of the product content that we had to zoom through. But also, obviously either reach out to either myself or Fede at any time. And we're happy to talk with anyone one-on-one or in a group about the work that we do and the product and any of our insights about this area. I'm based in Asia. I'm based in Singapore, and Fede is based in Mexico. So between the two of us, we cover a very, very broad time zone area. So yeah, do ping
There
us
are
if
no
you
excuses.
want to have a chat. Exactly. One of us will always be available. So thanks again for joining. Really appreciate it. And thank you again, Fede. And hope
Thank you
everyone
very
has
much.
a great evening or day, depending on where you are. Great. Okay. Take care, folks.
Thank you very
Cheers.
much.
Bye now.